Hello, my name's Maribel, and if you've ever been called less than by the very people who should have protected you, then maybe you'll understand. My sister once called me trash for marrying a black man she said would hold me back. She said I embarrassed the family name. But here's what she didn't expect. He didn't just lift me up. We built something they could never take. And when she realized that, that's when the real betrayal began. They erased my name from walls, from documents, from legacy. But the question is, how far will your own blood go when they realize they can't control you anymore? It was the kind of morning where the sun fooled you. Warm light, but the breeze still bit like late winter. I parked down the block, not wanting to make an entrance. Myers Park was showing off that day, blooms bursting along the sidewalk, iron gates yawning open to manicured driveways. It should have felt beautiful, like a celebration. Instead, my stomach had folded into itself by the time I reached the tent. The white canopy fluttered like a promise I already knew was empty. A girl at the welcome table blinked at me, unsure, her brows pinched. "Your name?" "Maribel Cross." She hesitated, flipped through the list. Didn't find me, didn't say it. Instead, she glanced sideways toward the interior, murmured something into a tiny headset, and then gave me the kind of smile you use when you've just stepped in something but want to stay polite. "You can go in, just head straight down the left side." No welcome drink, no place card. The smell hit before anything else, roses, mimosa fizz, and perfume that cost more than my wedding dress. I stepped in, heels catching briefly on the rug, and followed the sounds of clinking glasses. Celeste was already standing on the small platform up front, center stage in a cream dress tailored like ambition. Her voice floated over the speakers, syrupy and certain. "Some of us," she said, lifting her champagne glass, "choose to elevate the family name. Others marry down and drag us with them." Laughter, tight, polite, a ripple of glances. One man's head turned too quickly. Another woman bit the edge of her lip. No one said my name, but everyone looked at me. I stood frozen for a second before finding the table they had saved for me, if you could call it that. It was tucked so close to the portable restrooms, I could hear the hum of the generator. The place setting had no name, just a napkin and a chipped glass. Even the children's table had printed cards and glitter pens. I sat anyway. Dad didn't look my way. Mom's mouth twitched when our eyes met, but she turned quickly back to her flute. Celeste's voice dipped into some anecdote about Sterling's promotion and their upcoming startup gala. "A real legacy builder," she emphasized without looking in my direction. Legacy. That word again. Like love needed a resume. I stared down at my water glass and pretended to scroll through my phone. Texts from Orion sat unopened, patient as always. The memory came sharp and fast, our first dinner with my parents. The way Mom's smile thinned when she saw his hands, calloused from building something real. The way Dad leaned back and asked, "So, Orion, is that sales or sanitation?" I had laughed it off. Orion had too, but I remembered how his jaw flexed when we got back in the car, how he didn't turn on the radio like he usually did. Back in the present, the clatter of cutlery brought me out of the memory. I pushed back my chair and walked toward the restroom, needing air but settling for silence. As I passed a group by the champagne fountain, I caught a low voice behind me. "Oh, that's her husband? I thought he was staff." The words didn't hit like a slap. They hit like a bruise already forming. I stayed in the bathroom longer than necessary, letting the fan drown out the sound of my pulse. When I finally walked out, dessert was being served. Tiny cakes balanced on gold plates I had helped pay for. No one noticed me leave. Outside, the wind had picked up. Orion stood by the car, leaning casually against the door, tie loosened but still knotted, like he hadn't quite given up on being taken seriously. "I didn't want to make it worse," he said quietly. "You didn't," I answered, sliding into the passenger seat. I held a linen napkin in my hand, embroidered but wrinkled, discarded by someone who probably never even used it. We drove in silence, not heavy, just hollow. At a red light, Orion glanced over. "You okay?" I looked straight ahead. The sky had gone dull, a kind of faded blue that matched the ache behind my eyes. "They don't see me," I murmured. They never did. We didn't speak much on the way home. The hum of the tires against the road filled the silence like white noise in a hospital room, sterile, necessary, a buffer between what I felt and what I could admit. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the sun had dipped behind the row of pine trees lining the street. I sat there for a moment longer, watching the dusk press in on the windshield, before finally unbuckling my seatbelt. "I forgot to return Mom's pie dish," I muttered, already halfway out of the car. Orion nodded. "You want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "I'll be quick. She probably won't be home anyway." I walked the short distance to my parents' house, only 3 doors down, and let myself in with the spare key they never asked me to return. It felt odd, entering so quietly, but I'd done it my whole life. I didn't need permission back then. Funny how things shift while the furniture stays in the same place. The house was dim, but not dark. A single lamp in the hallway glowed amber against the floral wallpaper. I carried the pie dish with both hands, careful not to make noise. It was almost meditative, until I looked up. The family wall had changed. There used to be a haphazard mix of photos: school portraits, beach snapshots, some Christmas card rejects. Now it was pristine, curated, like someone hired a designer with a vendetta. Celeste and her fiancé had 4 different frames. One of them was a blown-up black-and-white shot from their engagement shoot. Her nephew had a baby collage. There was even a vintage photo of my great-uncle Herb on his tractor, recently reframed in bronze. But there was nothing of me. No wedding photo, not even one of those childhood pictures in the oversized graduation gown. Nothing. I took a step closer. Maybe they'd moved it to another wall. Maybe there was a reason, but deep down, I already knew. I placed the pie dish on the entry table and reached out, fingers brushing the edge of Celeste's portrait. The glass was spotless. Behind it, her smile stretched wide, confident, loved. And me? I'd been wiped out with a fresh coat of paint and a few thoughtful lighting choices. "They erased me," I whispered, my breath catching, "with lighting and drywall." I didn't cry. There was no performance in this moment, just a slow tightening in my chest, like someone had tied a ribbon around my ribs and kept pulling. I walked out without turning off the lamp. Back home, I found Orion in the kitchen chopping carrots. He looked up when I came in but didn't say anything, just slid the cutting board toward the edge, leaving space for me to join him. I didn't. I walked past and sank onto the couch. That wall had haunted me before. Now it had officially buried me. I curled into the corner, pulling the throw blanket over my knees. The pie dish had felt heavier walking back, as if it knew it was returning to a place that no longer considered me family. The steam from my tea fogged my glasses. I took them off and rubbed my eyes, exhausted. Not from the walking or the brunch or the memories, but from pretending. 2 weeks earlier, I'd worn that same mask to a fundraiser, a charity dinner for a gallery expansion project. Orion had offered to drive me. He always did when I got nervous about my family being there. That night, I was wearing a deep green dress I'd borrowed from a friend, and heels that pinched but looked expensive. I had hoped that blending in would be enough. Orion dropped me off at the front door and went to park. I walked in alone, greeted the hosts, smiled through the introductions. When he joined me 10 minutes later, his hands were tucked neatly in his pockets, shoulders back. He looked like someone who owned the room. Quietly, but I heard it. As he passed a table of my mother's friends, one of them leaned toward the other and said, just loud enough to pierce the hum of music, "Sweet of him to volunteer. The staff at these events are so professional." My face burned. Nadine looked right at her and then looked away. No correction, no laugh, nothing. Orion had heard too. I saw the flicker in his expression. He turned to me, unbothered, and said with a smile, "You hungry?" We walked toward the buffet, hand in hand, like nothing had happened. But inside, something broke a little more. Now, sitting in our living room, I curled deeper into the couch. Orion came over, sat beside me without a word. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't offer advice or silver linings. He just draped his arm over my shoulders and pulled me closer. That was the thing about him. He never needed to fix me to make me feel safe. I remembered something my mother once said at a brunch, years ago, before I even met Orion. A husband should elevate you, not complicate you. And yet, her idea of elevation always involved someone with a white-collar title and a country club membership, not a man like Orion, not someone who built things with his hands, who read Baldwin and Morrison in the evenings, who showed up without asking for applause. He didn't elevate me, he anchored me, kept me from floating off into the version of myself they wanted me to be, palatable, polite, silent. I leaned my head on his shoulder, staring out at the quiet street beyond our window. "They don't see your brilliance," I whispered, half to him, half to myself. "But they wouldn't survive a week without the kind of grace you bring." He didn't reply. He just kissed the top of my head, the way he always did when I got like this. And for a moment, in the hush of our living room, I let myself believe that maybe being unseen by them didn't mean I was invisible. Maybe it just meant I had finally outgrown their lens. The next few days slipped by in a haze of polite silence. Not the kind that heals, but the kind that hardens, like frost forming overnight on a windshield. You don't see it coming, and it distorts everything. I had spent most of the afternoon reorganizing files for an upcoming grant review. The Foundation's board wanted updated reports by the end of the week, and I figured staying busy might help me not think about Celeste's voice echoing across that brunch tent. I sat at my desk, laptop open, a steaming mug of chamomile nearby. The late spring sun had started to dim behind the trees outside the window, casting soft orange lines across the carpet. I clicked into my inbox and began combing through flagged emails. One message stood out, not because it was urgent, but because it was accidentally forwarded to me. I stared at the subject line, "RE, co-signing pitch deck, Family Impact Campaign." It had been part of a thread from 2 weeks ago, looped between Celeste and our mother. My name was buried in the CC line, probably added without thought, or maybe added on purpose. Curious, I clicked. "She's harmless," Celeste had written. "Just decorative, like a glass paperweight. Let her co-sign and smile pretty. That's her comfort zone." I blinked, once, twice, then again. There was no response from my mother in the email. No disagreement, no correction. "No, that's not fair, Celeste." Just silence. I didn't react right away. Didn't throw anything. Didn't cry. My stomach didn't even drop. There was something worse than outrage. Something colder. Clarity. I whispered to myself, and here I was, still hoping they meant well. The air in the room felt heavier, not hot, not cold, just weighted, like I'd been holding my breath and didn't know it. I didn't delete the email. I didn't even close it. Instead, I opened a new folder inside my personal drive and labeled it with all the precision of someone who's been through this before. Reminders. Do not forget what they said. I dragged the message in and let it sit there, glowing like a wound under glass. That was the first time in years I stopped trying to make excuses for them. No more, "She didn't mean it like that," or "Mom's just tired," or "It's not about race, it's just generational." No more bending to keep the peace in a war that had been declared on me years ago. I closed my laptop and went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. My hand shook, just slightly. Not from sadness, from restraint. The sky had dimmed further, a soft blue-gray now. Evening was settling in. I walked back to my desk and opened Orion's old pitch presentation, the one he had drafted late into the night, the one we'd co-built from scratch over coffee and arguments and heart. The same file Celeste had rebranded under her name last quarter when a gallery board was looking for fresh perspectives. They had eaten it up, of course. She wore it well, polished, blonde, easy to praise, but she hadn't written a single line of it. I traced my finger over the file name. Hartley Vision 2024. Orion had always told me, "If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu." I had laughed then, not really believing I'd ever be served up by my own blood. But now I was beginning to understand. The jokes weren't funny anymore. I whispered, "It's time I started protecting what we built." The next morning, I arrived at the office just after 8. The air smelled like ground espresso and new carpet. Talia, our assistant, was already at her desk, scanning documents with a look that said she hadn't had her second cup of coffee yet. "Morning," I said, walking straight to the back room where we kept our archived files. "Hey," she mumbled, then perked up. "Need something?" I nodded. Pull up the Delphine contract. I want to check the clause on brand representation, and if the Hartley LLC trademark paperwork is still under my login, reactivate the legal folder. Talia blinked, surprised by the precision in my voice. Usually I was the let's talk it through type, but today, no time for diplomacy. She nodded. On it. I moved with intent. No more hesitation. No more waiting for someone else to grant me authority I already had. Half an hour later, Orion walked in. He carried a breakfast wrap in one hand and a coffee in the other, both of which he slid onto my desk without saying a word. He looked at me for a moment, my posture, my eyes, my open files, and simply asked, "You ready?" I gave him a nod. Not sharp, not dramatic, just sure. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. We both knew. Something had shifted. I wasn't seeking validation anymore. I wasn't trying to be included. I was reclaiming what had always been mine. No more glass paperweight. By the time Friday crept in, something inside me had crystallized, cool, solid, and razor-edged. I wasn't pacing anymore. I wasn't rereading old emails or wondering if maybe, just maybe, I had misunderstood. That era of doubt had closed like a vault. It started the day before, around mid-morning. I was sitting in my office upstairs at the gallery, going through invoices for an upcoming installation, when an email pinged into my inbox. Subject line, excited for the launch of the Winthrop Ecoline preview event, details enclosed. I remember blinking at the header for a second, not even registering the sender. It was one of those luxury PR agencies that Celeste always loved name-dropping. I clicked. There it was. Slide after slide of branded household prototypes, sleek and glossy, each with little brand notes in perfect serif fonts. But one slide, my stomach turned. The product was nearly identical to the first design Orion sketched 3 years ago. Dual compartments, the slanted pour lip. Even the measurements were the same. No mistaking it. They hadn't even bothered to tweak it. She didn't just steal the design. She stole the blueprint of our first breakthrough and claimed it like an old family recipe. I didn't gasp. I didn't scream. I just stared. And then I said it aloud, flat and clear. She really did it. She took our future and called it hers. The betrayal didn't sting like before. It burned slow, controlled, contained, purposeful. That night, after closing the gallery, I stopped by the house before heading home. Orion was still downtown finishing a client session, so I made tea, kicked off my shoes, and pulled up my old Google Drive on the desktop. The archive folder was still there, Hartley Design Archive. I'd never had the heart to delete it, even after we pivoted to consulting work. Inside were photos of Orion hunched over our old kitchen island, drawings scanned from napkins, time-stamped documents, and a few messy voice memos where I was ranting about materials cost. Our beginning lived in that folder. Slide by slide, image by image, I aligned her PR slides next to our originals. Identical. I opened another folder, our LLC filings. Hartley Consulting, dormant, yes, but very much alive. Our legal shell. The name I'd quietly maintained in case we ever circled back to product again. I took a deep breath. Then I opened a blank document and titled it, Cease and Desist. By the time Orion got home, I was halfway through the formal draft and outlining the request to pause Delphine Gallery's branding campaign. The proof was undeniable. The motive was clear. And I wasn't going to let them bulldoze what we built just because I'd been raised to keep the peace. The next morning, I got dressed in a tailored navy suit, not because I had to, but because I needed to feel every inch of my authority. I drove downtown and met with a legal advisor I'd worked with before. His name was Greg, a soft-spoken man who always seemed to weigh every sentence before speaking. I slid the flash drive across the desk. Everything you need is on there. He reviewed the contents quietly. Halfway through, he looked up and said, "You don't have to crush them, you know." I gave a small smile. I'm not trying to crush anyone. I'm just making sure they don't step on us again. We signed the paperwork. No scene, no speeches. When I left his office, the city felt different, like it hadn't changed at all, but I had. I walked to my car slowly, savoring the morning air. The sky was clear, the sidewalks humming with early foot traffic. I passed a florist and paused at the window. White tulips. My mother hated tulips, said they always looked like they were giving up. I bought a bunch anyway. Back in the car, I rested the flowers on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed with a text from Orion. How did it go? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the tulips, then out the window at the sunlight breaking across the buildings. For once, I wasn't rushing to explain myself. Not to him, not to anyone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And this time, I wasn't asking. I didn't reply to Orion's text right away. I let the moment breathe, then slid my phone into my bag and started the car. As I pulled out onto the main road, the tulips shifted slightly on the passenger seat. Soft and white, they felt like the first decision I'd made for no one but myself in a long time. By the time Monday rolled around, my inbox was already teetering on the edge of chaos. Meeting reminders, budget approvals, a request from the gallery to confirm next month's speaker. I worked through them methodically, coffee in hand, mind steady. Then I saw it. Subject line: Winthrop Future Collective Gala Sponsorship Request. The logo caught my eye before the sender did. But there she was, Celeste Quinlan, in crisp black font. The request had come through the foundation's official grant portal, which meant she wanted a paper trail. She wanted legitimacy. I clicked. The opening paragraph sang praises of cross-sector innovation, legacy building, and empowering voices across art and tech. A few scrolls later, there was a call for funding, more than generous. The amount wasn't the insult, it was the audacity. In bold italics near the bottom, sponsored in part by the Hartley family legacy, dedicated to empowerment. No mention of Orion. Not a single nod to the fact that the featured product line was built, brick by prototype, on his back. Just polished PR fluff, designed to dazzle donors. I closed the email, then opened my calendar. Clicked Tuesday, 2 p.m. Private review session. I typed her name into the invite. I didn't add a subject line, just sent it. By noon the next day, she had accepted. The conference room at the foundation was small. Glass walls, pale blue accents, 2 chairs, 1 monitor. I logged into Zoom early, adjusted the lighting, let the silence settle. At exactly 1:59, Celeste's face appeared. Hair styled just enough to look effortless. Subtle makeup, smile dialed in at 60%. "Hey, Bells," she chirped. "Thanks for squeezing me in." I nodded. "Of course." She launched into her pitch without missing a beat. Charts, stats, vision statements. She even said community uplift twice. I let her finish. When she paused to sip from her metal straw, I leaned forward. "Did you intend to credit Orion?" I asked slowly, "or were you planning to pretend you invented what he built again?" Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "Bells, come on. You know how branding works. It's a team effort." "Right," I said evenly, "which is why the only team member with an actual patent seems to be missing." She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Hartley Foundation is retracting all formal support, effective immediately. Delphine Gallery has been notified to pause their promotional partnership. And the clause you inserted last month into the shared vision agreement, it's been voided." Celeste blinked. "You're voiding the agreement?" "I'm correcting an oversight," I said. The call ended 32 seconds later. She didn't say goodbye. I knew the fallout would be quick. What I didn't expect was how satisfying the silence would feel. Back in my office, I made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, just warmth and clarity. Then the text came in from a friend at Delphine. "Just saw your name pulled from the gala banner. Everything okay?" I typed, "Better than okay." Meanwhile, across town, Celeste paced her office like a woman who had just realized the furniture was bolted to the floor and nothing was going to move for her anymore. Her assistant knocked once, then slipped in with a printout. "It's from the gallery. They're pulling their entire collection from the event. The media contact said they were evaluating coverage alignment." Celeste didn't respond. She stared at the framed certificate on her wall. Top 40 under 40. It suddenly looked smaller. She dropped her tablet onto the desk, the sound sharp and hollow. Because for the first time, she couldn't spin this. Not with a post, not with a phone call, not even with a favor, and I wasn't done yet. The day after the gallery fallout, I kept my routine tight, clean, deliberate. morning tea, inbox review, a scheduled walkthrough of our new installation room. But something felt off, like the air around me had learned to flinch. I couldn't place it until my assistant, Clara, burst through the side entrance around 6 p.m., eyes wide, phone in hand. "Maribel, you need to see this." She handed me the phone without another word. The screen was already open to a tab, one of those pop culture, Business Insider sites that masks venom behind pastel font and shallow smiles. The headline hit like a brick. "Silent co-founder or silent saboteur, internal turmoil at Winthrop Collective." I scrolled. There were sources close to the family, conveniently unnamed, claiming that I had tried to block my sister's campaign because of creative differences rooted in envy. One paragraph alleged I'd misused foundation funds, despite zero access to that level of finance control in the joint venture. But it was the final line that stopped my breath. Even her husband's past couldn't save her from falling behind, though some say that past should have disqualified him to begin with. There it was, clear as day, dressed in ambiguity. A public knife slipped under the ribs with just enough plausible deniability to skate past legal repercussions. But not personal ones. Not for Orion. I stared at the screen, motionless. Clara said quietly, "Do you want me to start flagging this with PR?" I shook my head. "Close the door behind you." She left, and I stood there in the center of my own gallery, hands shaking, not from fear, not even from anger, but from something deeper, a tremor of something I had buried long ago, because I knew that detail. I knew it better than anyone. Orion had told me on our third real date, when he still wore his nervousness like a badge of honor. Juvenile charge, wrong crowd, sealed record. He looked me in the eye and said, "If that makes you leave, I get it. I'd rather you know." I hadn't left. But Celeste had gone there anyway, dragged a wound into the light not to understand it, but to weaponize it. By the time I walked through our front door that night, I had already deleted the article from my browser history. Didn't matter. It was burned into my memory. I found Orion in the kitchen, rinsing out a mug. He glanced over, saw my face, and didn't need to ask. "I saw it," he said softly. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I want to go over there. I want to rip her name off the front of every partnership we ever inked." He dried his hands with slow precision. "That's what they want. They want rage on the record. You go at them loud, and suddenly, you're the irrational one." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I grabbed a pen from the drawer, pulled the back of a grocery list, and scribbled 2 lines in my neatest print. "If they touch him again, I don't just play fair, I play final." I folded the note and slid it into my journal. Orion reached over and covered my hand with his. "You don't owe me anything," he murmured. "I should have told you it might still follow me." "No," I replied. "You thought you'd finally been allowed to move forward. That's not a crime." Later that night, while he slept, I opened my laptop and scheduled a virtual meeting for 8 a.m. with our legal team. I didn't pace, I didn't hesitate, I just moved. The next morning came clear and steady. The login screen blinked on. 4 small windows filled with the faces of our firm's legal advisors flickered to life. "Morning, Maribel," said Diane, the lead counsel. "We saw the article. Damage control?" I nodded. 3 moves. First, we prepare a formal statement and request immediate removal of defamatory language. Second, I want you to anonymously leak an internal memo showing that Celeste redirected donated gallery pieces to her personal collectors list. There was a silence. "That's big," one of them said. "Do we want to light this match?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to ignite. I'm here to identify the person holding the gas can." "And third?" Diane asked. "We file for independent trademark protection. Hartley and Orion Holdings. My name, our product. It never should have been tied to them in the first place." One of the interns on the call muttered something under his breath. Something like, "Damn." I smiled, just barely. "You're all paid well," I said. "It's time to work like it." The call ended just before 9. I stood from my chair and stretched, letting the weight of it roll down my spine and out of my fingertips. Outside, the trees whispered in the wind like they knew a storm was coming. But this time, I was the one bringing it. They wanted to use his past to shame us. Instead, they signed their future away. It started like any quiet Saturday. Low jazz played through the gallery's ceiling speakers, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air as guests moved from canvas to sculpture, murmuring compliments and impressions. We weren't expecting press coverage today, just collectors, a few local artists, and some donors who preferred their art like their conversations, selective and unhurried. I was near the back, adjusting the lighting on a new mixed-media piece Orion had helped mount the night before, when the front doors banged open hard enough to rattle the glass. The music didn't stop, but the energy in the room did. Everyone felt it. Celeste walked in like she owned the place, sunglasses still on, Louboutin heels clicking against the concrete floor, blazer crisp enough to slice through the tension she brought with her. I didn't move. I didn't need to. She was already headed my way. She didn't stop until she was inches from my face, her voice low and sharp enough to cut glass. You really thought leaking that would make you look noble? I didn't blink. No, I thought it might remind you who you used to be, before the branding deals and empty applause. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Still playing martyr, huh? Still pretending this is about justice and not jealousy? Guests slowed their steps, casually pretending to study the nearest piece. I caught sight of a familiar face by the sculpture room, Marcus Langley, a journalist from Art and Culture Monthly. I'd invited him weeks ago. He wasn't taking notes. Yet. Celeste leaned in slightly. You've always hated that I was chosen first, for everything. I didn't raise my voice. I just met her eyes. No, I hated that you lied with affection while stealing what I built. Her smile cracked. Oh, please, you act like you're some unsung genius. We all know who carried the image of this family. I took a breath. Slow, steady. And we all know who polished the mask so hard she forgot there was a face underneath it. That did it. She stepped back and raised her voice just enough to be heard. You know how hard Mom worked for our reputation? You think she'd approve of the way you're airing dirty laundry? Now the crowd was fully pretending not to watch, but they were. Marcus's phone was out, not raised, just held loosely at his side, the camera light dim but blinking. I said softer this time. Mom worked hard to build a name. You just painted yours over mine. Celeste's hand balled at her side. Whatever respect they had for you, it's gone now. I didn't look away. Respect that's bought isn't worth the receipt. She didn't respond. She turned on her heel and strode out, sunglasses never leaving her face. I watched her disappear into the sunlight, the door swinging shut behind her like punctuation. Silence lingered. Then the click of shoes approached. Marcus. He gave me a small nod, eyes cautious but curious. You want to go on record? He asked. Or should I just quote the art? I looked around at the pieces lining the walls. Some mine, some Orion's, all honest. Quote the art, I said. That's where the truth lives. He gave a knowing smile and moved on. I stayed put. No need to chase clarity when it had already arrived. Monday morning started with a breeze that carried the scent of magnolia and the quiet hum of a new beginning. I opened the door not expecting anything more than the usual bills and circulars, but there it was, an envelope with weight, both in paper and in consequence, cream-colored, sealed with the navy and gold crest of Verne Holdings. I held it for a second before slicing it open with the edge of my thumbnail. Inside, a letter. Not from my parents, not from Celeste, not even from an assistant trying to sugarcoat some committee formality. It was addressed to me, my full name, no middle initial, no Mrs. or plus guest, just Maribel Hartley. It confirmed what I hadn't dared imagine. I'd been listed as co-trustee on the Nevada estate portfolio, the same entity Celeste had been leveraging for months under the radar, the same one that tied directly to the family trust and dictated majority votes for expansion approvals. Tucked behind that letter was a second page, a board meeting, scheduled for Friday. One item on the agenda, a vote for portfolio transfer approval, transitioning the trust's assets into Celeste's newest engagement expansion. And here's the kicker. I was the only one with a vote. I reread it 3 times before setting it down. Then I folded the letter, tucked it back into its envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter beside the white tulips I had bought earlier that week. The air shifted inside me. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even pride, it was clarity. The week passed in a strange quiet. I didn't call Celeste. I didn't tip my hand. I met with our legal team once. I took Orion out to dinner twice, and I slept for the first time in months, like someone who knew they weren't waiting for permission anymore. Friday came cool and gray. I dressed in black, sleek, simple, intentional. No jewelry except the wedding band on my finger. A small statement, but it mattered. The boardroom was exactly what you'd expect. Marble-top table, dark walnut walls, too much air conditioning, and a carefully arranged carafe of cucumber water no one ever drank. A few of the old names were already seated when I arrived. Men with silver cufflinks and practiced expressions. I nodded to Gregory Verne, who called the meeting to order. Then, right on cue, the door opened again, and Celeste entered like she owned the ceiling tiles. Hair glossy, lipstick sharp, confidence poured into her like it was on tap. She scanned the room, eyes landing on me with a flicker of hesitation she tried to mask with a smile. It didn't land. "Good morning," she said brightly. "Glad to see we're all here to move forward." I didn't reply, just opened my folder. She launched into her pitch like a seasoned politician. Numbers, demographics, market opportunity, female-led impact, cross-cultural expansion, everything except honesty. She even threw in a sentimental touch, citing family roots and the privilege of continuing our mother's vision. It was like watching someone carve a statue of themselves in midair, hoping no one noticed the chisel was made of smoke. When she finally finished, Gregory turned to me. "Miss Hartley?" I stood. "I have no speech," I began, voice steady. "I only have facts." I placed one slim document on the table, printed on thick paper, signed, time-stamped, sealed. "This is my formal revocation of Clause 8C, Celeste Winthrop's temporary engagement clause and discretionary equity access." I didn't pause. "In its place, I've authorized a grant structure under Hartley and Orion Holdings, earmarked for underrepresented innovators in art and sustainable design." There were no gasps, no dramatic music, just the quiet shuffle of someone adjusting in their seat. Celeste blinked once, twice, then spoke. "You're punishing me for being ambitious." "No," I said. "I'm preventing you from redefining theft as ambition." Gregory nodded once, signaling the vote's recording. The gavel clicked down, motion denied, transition blocked, access revoked. The moment was clean, final, no screaming, no chairs thrown. But something seismic had shifted, and we all knew it. In the hallway outside, the tension still clung to the walls like humidity. Celeste caught up to me near the elevator. "You think this makes you a hero?" she hissed. I turned toward her, calm. "No, I think it makes me the adult in the room." She narrowed her eyes. "You destroyed me." I didn't flinch. "No, you built this version of yourself with bricks made of borrowed credit and misused trust. I just stopped pretending it was architecture." For a moment, the pain in her face slipped past the pride, but only for a moment. I pressed the elevator button and stepped inside. "Whatever you think you've won?" "I haven't won anything," I cut in. "I've just stopped losing." The doors closed before she could say another word. Back at home, Orion was in the kitchen, chopping herbs like he had no idea the ground just shifted beneath us. I didn't interrupt him. I just poured myself a glass of water and stared out the window as the wind moved through the trees. There was no applause waiting for me, no streamers, no champagne, just stillness. And for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The next few days drifted by in a rhythm I didn't try to control. The emails could wait. The calls could go unanswered. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing, wasn't proving. I was just living. Early Saturday morning, I stepped into the gallery before sunrise. The security lights still cast long shadows across the marble floor. The scent of lavender and lemon oil filled the air again, same blend we used the day we opened. Back then, I thought it would make the place feel fresh. Now, it smelled like resolve. I moved from wall to wall, checking placements, adjusting frames, smoothing labels. There was no exhibit launch, no board visit. Just me, alone with the work, mine and Orion's. No one breathing down our necks. No one telling us what was marketable or on brand. At the far end of the space, I unwrapped a small photo and hung it quietly. It wasn't glamorous, just the two of us, barefoot, sitting on a paint-streaked floor years ago, laughing like the world was only big enough for joy. No plaque, no spotlight, just truth, framed without performance. I stepped back, looked at it for a long moment. This wasn't a monument, it was a memory, kept alive not because someone demanded it, but because we earned it. Later that morning, upstairs in my bedroom, I pulled open the top drawer of my desk and slid out a sealed envelope. The paper was thick, cream-colored, slightly curled at the edges from being handled too often. My handwriting across the front was neat but tight. To Celeste. I opened it, read the words one last time. You broke me, then blamed me for the cracks, but I rebuilt without asking for your glue. I folded the letter back, returned it to the drawer, and closed it slowly. That chapter was done. Not because she apologized, she never would, but because I no longer needed the apology. I wasn't trying to hand her guilt or hold her shame. I was done translating pain into invitations. Downstairs, the small television near the coffee station played quietly in the background. A local broadcast covered the Vern Holdings Gala. I didn't watch until I heard the name, Celeste's name, conspicuously absent. The anchor read the official press note. The board acknowledges a shift in leadership vision and values. Future campaigns will reflect that change. They didn't have to name her. The omission was the message. I turned the volume down and turned the lights up, letting the morning fully claim the space. Orion showed up not long after with 2 mugs of tea. He didn't knock, he just stepped in like always and handed me mine, still steaming. We walked out back and settled on the bench by the garden. The wind brushed through the leaves above us like a hymn, only old trees remembered. She never said sorry, I murmured. Orion didn't flinch. She never knew how. I sipped my tea, letting that settle. That's not mine to fix, I said quietly, and I meant it. Inside, on the back gallery wall, a new title plaque had been mounted. The exhibit, The Ones Who Stayed. It wasn't flashy. No interactive screen, just texture and story, woven into every brushstroke and wire bend. It was a gallery of work by artists who had been dismissed, overlooked, discarded. Every piece whispered survival. Every label carried names once erased from invitations, the kind of truth you didn't have to shout to be heard. As the wind picked up and scattered petals across the concrete, I leaned into the bench's backrest, feeling something I hadn't in a very long time. Quiet. But not the kind that silences you. The kind that finally feels like it belongs to you. Legacy isn't what they leave you, it's what they couldn't take from you. Looking back, I used to believe peace came from being accepted by others, by family, by legacy, by those who spoke loudest in the room. But peace, real peace, is quiet. It doesn't need to be proven, posted, or praised. It just needs to be claimed. If you've ever felt like the one sitting quietly at the back, the one whose voice was always just a bit too inconvenient to be heard, know this. You don't have to shout to take up space. You just have to stop shrinking. They tried to erase me with silence, but I made something louder with grace. And maybe that's the lesson here. Legacy isn't about being remembered by those who never saw you to begin with. It's about building something no one can take away, even when they try. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your own voice? How did you handle it? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story moved you or made you think of your own journey, comment 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if this video didn't quite land for you, I'm open. Tell me why and where you're tuning in from. This space is for real stories, real hearts. And if you'd like to follow more stories like this, stories about family, truth, resilience, and reclaiming your voice, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Just one click, and you'll never miss what comes next. Until then, take care of yourself. Your peace is worth protecting.